Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. SAA Technical's former head of procurement, Nontsasa Memela, will be back on the stand at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry sitting in Parktown in Johannesburg. Memela has been grilled over the last 3 days over her alleged involvement in awarding a 1.3 billion rand tender to US-based company AAR to supply aircraft components for SAAT. Her testimony has been defensive and she accused the Commission's evidence leader, Advocate Kate Hofmeyr, of being hostile towards her. Our SABC News reporter, Mbalenhle Mthethwa, has been closely following proceedings at the Commission and she joins us now. Mbalenhle, very good morning and thank you so much for coming through this morning. Listening to Nontsasa's testimony, the complete disregard for governance at her level, not to know that it's improper to engage with tender bidders.
Yes, it is rather concerning sitting on the other side and just hearing someone trying to justify breaking the rules and saying that they actually haven't broken any rules, and explaining to the Commission that the information that was given and handed over to a potential bidder was information that was freely available. We heard testimony from Sibongile Sambo, who is a BE partner with a consortium that includes AAR, which is an American-based company that was later awarded a components supply tender contract. You've just mentioned that it was valued at 1.3 billion rand. Now, we heard testimony from her where she said that she met with Nontsasa at a filling station, a Shell filling station in Alberton, where she was handed over a flash disk containing tender pricing information. This information was, she was supposed to use this information in order to give herself and the consortium she was working with leverage over other bidders. But Nontsasa Memela maintains that this information was information that was freely available. Now, Advocate Kate Hofmeyr has presented a WhatsApp communication between Memela and Sambo, where she then tells Sambo that I didn't really think that you would then use this information against me. And we hear Advocate Kate Hofmeyr asking Advocate Memela, why is it that, you know, she feels that this information could have been used against her if this information was information that was freely available from previous bids that couldn't have prejudiced other bidders, because bidders are essentially at liberty to change their bid prices. And we didn't really quite get an answer from that, but she did say that she only started talking to Sibongile Sambo about that and telling her that, you know, she didn't expect her to use this information against her after she'd seen media reports talking about this components tender contract. This is not the first improper relationship she's had with a bidder. There have been others. I mean, we also heard testimony from Nontsasa Memela, I think on Monday, where she was answering questions relating to the sale and irregular sale of GPU units. Now, we understand that a year prior to the sale of these GPU units, SAA Technical had bought them for around 800 million rand each. This is an amount that came up to 9 million rand, and which they also had to pay, because they had to pay for shipping, it came up to 11 million rand. However, these GPUs, 12 GPUs, very essential to the runnings of SAA and SAA Technical, was sold at a meager amount of 248,000 rand each. And we understand that, you know, it's still unclear as to who approved that amount. And we understand that Memela also had a relationship with JM Aviation Director Vuyo Nzeku.
And we imagine that these are the very contracts that NUMSA and the Cabin Crew Association are aggrieved about, that these are illegal contracts that are just continuing without check.
Yes, you know, I think just to answer that, I'd like to go back to some of the conversations I had with SACA and NUMSA during the SAA strike in November last year, where they spoke about the financial constraints, SAA's financial constraints, and they said that the only biggest, labor is not the biggest drain to SAA's finances, but the procurement spend is. And this essentially speaks to that, because it brings about questions around procurement and who's basically making sure that all the dots are, the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed. I mean, when they're going through these procurement when they're going through these tender processes, because it's rather concerning to hear that SAA sold GPUs that they essentially needed to JM Aviation at the fraction of the price, where JM Aviation then sold to Swissport, and Swissport is now leasing those very same GPUs at around 450 to 550 rand per hour. Now, I mean, we haven't really done the maths in terms of how much that is a day and how much that is a month and how much that is
we really
a
need
year.
to have the conversation.
Yes, we need to start having that conversation, but we can imagine that is a lot of money to be paying to lease GPU units that were essentially yours, that belonged to SAA Technical and were later sold at next to nothing, and SAA never really got the profits from selling those GPU units.
Especially in an environment where SAA is claiming not to have money.
Indeed.
Now, Nontsasa's assertion that Advocate Hofmeyr is hostile towards her, does that hold water?
So it has been a tense couple of days. Nontsasa Memela was supposed to appear before the commission, just testify rather, for one day, which was on Friday. But her testimony has extended to over 3 days. I mean, I think it's 4 days. Today is day 4 of her testimony. And that's because there have been quite a few interruptions. We've also seen a bit of a back and forth between herself and Advocate Kate Hofmeyr, where Advocate Kate Hofmeyr would ask her a question and she would then ask her to clarify that question and say she doesn't understand the question, and that has actually contributed to the delays. And then to add on to further disruptions, we also have Nontsasa Memela's attorney also jumping in every now and again to intervene, and we saw the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo also trying to intervene in the situation, asking Memela to give crisp answers to Advocate Kate Hofmeyr's questions. But you know, later on today, we are expecting, we have been expecting JM Aviation Director Vuyonzeko to take the stand with bated breath, given that she has been mentioned on a number of occasions during Memela's testimony. We understand that Vuyonzeko's company is the one that paid 250 million rand towards Memela's personal home. However, Memela has explained to the commission that the 2.5 million rand that she received from JM Aviation was not a kickback, was not a bribe, but it was for land that Vuyonzeko had purchased from her mother.
So at no point throughout this bizarre testimony does she accede wrongdoing.
No, she does not concede to wrongdoing. She does not accept any wrongdoing at all. She denies, and she goes on to explain and justify her actions, and she says there are no rules preventing her from acting in a particular manner.
Yeah, well, we'll see how the day turns out, I suppose.
Yes,
Mbali, thank you so much for coming through. Mbali has got to rush through to Parktown, where proceedings will be beginning any moment.